You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Typhoon Noru is making landfall in the eastern coast of Luzon right now, with winds estimated at 130 miles per hour and a pressure of 938 millibars, a category 4 still at this point after it reached category 5 status early this morning local time. And here we are in the evening. It's just gone 9 p.m. in the Philippines and we're looking over a landfall there. Looks like it's just occurred not very long ago, and if I was to try and figure out exactly where the landfall location is, I would suggest that it's probably just a few kilometers from a direct landfall over Dingalan in Aurora province. Probably around 7 or 8 kilometers south of Dingalan is what we have here for the probable landfall location. And that would have occurred about half an hour ago is the probable time for that landfall. So it is now over land, the centre of the storm, and Signal 5 warnings are in effect for large parts of Luzon, as you can see here on the chart from PAGASA. Signal 5 warning means that the very worst conditions from a typhoon could be happening in those areas for parts, well, for the Polillo Islands, for northern Quezon, southern Aurora, and southern Nueva Ecija, Bulacan, and easternmost Pampanga. Signal 4 warnings for the whole rest of that track of the storm through the Philippines. You can quite clearly see where they expect it to go, and it will. Northern Metro Manila, indeed, under a Signal 4 warning, and the rest of it under Signal 3. Signal 3 across Laguna, Cavite, southern Bataan, northern part has a Signal 4. Crazy times we've got right now. Signal 4 for the whole of Zambales as well. This is Force 13 Live. My name is Nathan Foy here in the studio once again, as always, and we're joined today by Jose, who is going to chat to us, I imagine, a little bit about these various storms. Of course, we're not just tracking Noru right now, we are still looking at Tropical Storm Ian, which is in the Atlantic Ocean, and people starting to get a little bit worried about that. Major hurricane landfall expected in western Cuba, and then off towards the Florida Peninsula or the Panhandle. We're not sure yet, it's going to be a close one. But the main focus right now, of course, is Noru, which has just made landfall around half an hour ago, is the information we have. And an incredible storm it has been. Jose, you told me just before we started the stream today that you were, of course, you're living in Florida, so you're looking a lot more at Tropical Storm Ian, and you didn't even notice that it reached Category 5 status, Noru, because it happened so quickly yesterday, and it started to weaken pretty quickly as well this morning.
Yeah, it's true. Like you said, I was really focused on the system that's coming to Florida, and I forgot about the Noru in the Western Pacific. And once I looked at Zoom.Earth, I just saw it reach Category 5, and I was stunned, like completely stunned. I was like surprised.
The Philippine name, of course, being Karding. We are monitoring this storm as it moves through the Philippines. Unfortunate on our bottom left bar there that we don't have any imagery of Fiona anymore, but I can assure you it is still going as an extratropical cyclone. Anyway, Signal 5 warnings, as we've already seen. We could get really high rainfall amounts in the region of 500 millimeters, possibly in some isolated high amounts. We're already hearing about river levels really going up, and all kinds of other things. We've also got, and now I think he told us that he wouldn't be talking to us on the stream, but we've got Ike with us, and a webcam that he is showing from his place in Laguna, which is under, as mentioned, I think it was signal 3 there, and you can see how it looks in that location right now. It's quite still.
That's what I was saying. I'm sorry about that.
But oh look, you're getting a little bit more breeze there now at Ike's location in Laguna. Keep looking at that for a few moments. You can send in your comments and questions live on the air. You can start your message with Force 13 all in text. This evening, this storm is piling through with estimated winds of around 130 miles per hour. In kilometers per hour, that is, I think, nearly 200 kilometers per hour. Somewhere close to that. And let's see if we've got some comments. George says, ground observations in northern Metro Manila, heavy rains and typhoon gusts. Yeah, that's not a big surprise. Typhoon gusts definitely could be seen up there in the northern part, closer to where the centre of the storm is. Now, if I was to get a centre fix for us right now, and actually, let's take a look at some radar imagery, because that tells us a lot more about the centre than the satellite can, especially since the eye has definitely clouded over at this point. Let's switch back here and look at the latest radar. And you can see the progress of the storm there. Ignore the last two blocky images there, that's a future cast. And the eye making landfall. Interestingly, when we look at this imagery, that last frame there was from 20 minutes ago, and that still shows possibly that the storm's only just making landfall. In fact, no, not even right now. I don't know if that might be delayed or whether it's a bit different, but the radar imagery isn't the best. Let's get that straight. However, it does look like the western side is the weak point, and the eastern side is now containing the strongest conditions with those red zones on the right hand side of the eye. But as far as we can establish on satellite at least, we believe that the center of the storm is approximately 15 kilometers southwest of Dingalan now, and that would bring it closer to Gapan City, 27 kilometers, Cabanatuan City, 33 kilometers, and Tarlac City, 71 kilometers ahead of the storm. And that puts the storm currently 87 kilometers from Manila. And at a short distance like that, then there is definitely the possibility that they could be receiving typhoon gusts in Metro Manila. Let's see if we can check some more satellite imagery. There's obviously that one. Let's look at the further zoomed out view of the storm in relation to the Philippines, and you can see all across Luzon there we're looking at substantial impacts. Interesting to note though, when you look towards the northeast of Luzon, on the northern side there's it doesn't go out very far on the northern side, so there will be strong winds, but in general it looks like the rain rates won't be too high when you go north of central Aurora province, probably. Let's see if we can get some questions. How much will the mountain range slow down Noru? I'm guessing in terms of intensity, because land doesn't really slow down storm's movement. But the area that it's crossed over is actually not that mountainous compared to other parts of Luzon further north. And so I would be slightly concerned right now that the weakening potential for the storm is not going to be as high as it could be. Indeed, earlier today the Gtwc forecast called for the storm to only weaken to a Category 2 before re-intensifying on approach to Vietnam. I've not had the chance to check the latest map on that actually, so I'm going to see if I can just grab that straight away and take a look at what the Gtwc is saying now on their latest forecast. And they are calling now for the storm to weaken to a Category 1 and then for it to come back to Category 3 as it approaches Vietnam. So interesting turn of events with that Gtwc cone, because it would appear now that last night or early this morning local time we were looking at Gtwc were forecasting a 140 mile an hour landfall in central Vietnam, which would have been pretty much unprecedented. Now they're only going for around Category 3, 115 miles per hour, which is still very bad, but has happened before. And every so often we're seeing flashes on Ike's camera. I wonder whether that is lightning strikes that are occurring there, that we see time and again. But that's the latest view there from Laguna, which is quite far on the southern side of the storm, and they'll probably get tropical storm force winds and gusts up to maybe about 60 to 65 miles per hour, around 100 kilometers per hour gust possibly at that location. Manila will get stronger, potentially typhoon force gusts, and obviously further north, some of those locations that I mentioned a few moments ago, distances from, they'll all be getting major typhoon conditions as we look at another flash on that imagery, which I assume is lightning. Albert says it's getting quite scary here in Bulacan, high winds and heavy rain. Will conditions get worse in the following hours? And when you take a look at its location, it's going to get a little bit worse there for a time. And if you're in northern Bulacan, you may well get the eye of the storm. Will Noru cross into the Bay of Bengal and reform? We've seen no indications of that being a plausibility yet. Another comment, would Typhoon Noru re-strengthen back to Category 5 after exiting the Philippines? No, definitely not. That would just be pretty crazy. Can this become a super typhoon in the South China Sea? You know, odds against. In fact, if I was to read out the latest Gtwc prognosis, and we might be able to tell what their thought process is about how much it might strengthen afterwards, which would be an interesting thought. So let me just go and grab that. Where's that gone? So this is what the Gtwc is saying right now. They're showing a very intense, medium-sized super typhoon with a 6 nautical mile pinhole eye about to make landfall into central Luzon. Of course it has now, this is slightly out of date. The system has weakened slightly. Okay, that was interesting. The system has weakened slightly as the western feeder bands have made landfall. However, the tight eye wall remained symmetrical and deep, with overshooting cloud tops below -80 degrees Celsius with relatively low vertical wind shear. The eye, where the initial position is based on with high confidence, is vertically stacked, as evidenced by very warm 20 degrees temperatures before it shrunk to a pinhole size. I mean, this was a little bit earlier, trending down. But as for the forecast, tracking generally westwards, making landfall over Aurora province and that happened already, and track across the plains of central Luzon, then over the Zambales mountain range before exiting into the South China Sea just after, what time would that be? I've got to convert time zones here as we go along as well. In about 6 hours, a little bit after 6 hours. The land interaction, especially with the mountain range, will significantly erode the storm system down to 85 knots by the time it leaves. After it exits into the South China Sea, the warm waters will help fuel a secondary intensification. They're expecting a peak to around 100 knots by the time we get to 48 hours as it approaches central Vietnam. It will then make a final landfall south of Hue at around 60 hours. After landfall, the rugged terrain of Vietnam, Cambodia and Thailand will rapidly weaken the system to dissipation by day 5. Numerical models are in very tight agreement, lending high confidence in the track forecast, adjusted slightly left of consensus up to 72 hours, and then low confidence afterwards due to the uncertainty of prolonged land interaction. There is also medium and low confidence in the intensity forecast for the same reason. So it is a low confidence forecast, but I would maintain this most likely shouldn't become a super typhoon when it moves over the South China Sea. It has happened once or twice before, but I just don't see it happening to this one. Could be wrong. We'll have to take a look and just monitor it. But the main story right now is that Typhoon Noru made landfall very close to Dingalan in very southern Aurora province at about 8:30 p.m. and Signal 5 warnings remain in effect for a significant chunk of the area that it is currently over right now. 210 kilometers per hour sustained winds with higher gusts and an estimated pressure of 938 millibars, according to the latest information from our analysis team. Is there a chance that Noru left of Luzon, that it will re-strengthen again? Most likely. Sea surface temperatures in the South China Sea are very warm, and conditions will be favourable for some renewed intensification, but at the moment, suggestions here that this storm will weaken to Category 2 as it exits the western coast of Luzon, and possibly a little bit more weakening as it tries to find its feet again. Storms don't really just intensify again straight away. Quite often they have to get their structure sorted out again after it gets pulverized by the land and mountains that it's about to move over, although not as much of an impact as northern Luzon would have caused to this storm. All along that area though, stretching to the western coast Zambales, we could be looking at Category 3 conditions, and that's why we have up to Category 3 conditions, and that's why we have Signal 4 warnings out currently in effect for some of those interior provinces out to Zambales. Once again, let's show you that map from PAGASA. Signal 5 there extending into eastern Pampanga, southernmost Nueva Ecija province, and those Signal 4s extending right the way through to Zambales and southern Pangasinan and northern Bataan. And northern Metro Manila, let's not forget. More comments here. Hi says, unrelated, but how extreme will European winter this year get? Oh my. Well, that is a question. I've not really had a chance to assess it very much, but I might have a sneaky feeling that we could be in for a bit of a winter across Europe, but I really don't know. I'll have to take a proper look at that. We do have a European team led by Alex, who might know more about that, but that is unrelated. Does Noru have similarities to Rai? Well, Rye made landfall in an entirely different place, so I struggle to see the similarities, quite honestly. Wind is calming down in Marikina, but around 6 to 8, it's so strong earlier on. And if you do have any observations on the ground, if it's safe to do so, please let us know. We've also got questions regarding Tropical Storm Ian as well. Will Ian hit Alabama or Mississippi? It's still very unlikely, but the National Hurricane Center cone, the very edge of it is over Alabama, so you can't completely rule that out just yet. And they're currently going with 50 miles per hour on the latest National Hurricane Center cone. Let's just have a quick look at what Ian looks like this morning. Here is some imagery, and there it is. And rather underwhelming, I would say. It doesn't look that great. Convection is struggling, I'm not sure why. But still plenty of time for its fortunes to change, which is still bad news for Cuba and Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman under a hurricane warning right now as well. But Noru is the main focus at this time. It is currently a Category 4 with 130 miles per hour and a pressure of 938, making landfall near that intensity after it really blew up yesterday, last night, overnight, into a really powerful Category 5 storm. This morning we got winds of 175 miles per hour estimated, and mercifully wind shear started to take its toll from the east and really tore apart the eastern eye wall, and eventually it got to the eye and the storm started to collapse quite a bit. But still, we're looking at a Category 4 landfall right now that's just occurred, and that can cause tremendous damage. Not just that though, we are looking at some areas getting 500 millimeters of rainfall, so the potential for flash flooding and landslides is also very high. Will Noru eventually grow in the South China Sea? It will certainly grow in size. All storms tend to do that after they make landfalls and restructure themselves. They always end up larger. And a moment of lovely, our moderator says high winds in Taguig and near the airport city. It is crazy since power does go on and off. Several flashes from power generators that went off according to them. So it is a significant problem, and I do expect that we'll see quite a lot of power outages and certainly power disruption as the storm blows through this area. If I was to give you a little statistic on the amount of people that are expecting typhoon force winds, let me just draw this quickly on a map. And I would say that the population that might be affected by typhoon force winds is approximately 4 or 5 million. And that's right in that central core that's blowing up minus 80-degree cloud tops. Now you'll notice those higher cloud tops have gotten a lot more prevalent. That's not a sign of intensification, but it's a sign of gosh, I forgot the word actually. It's a sign of adaptation in a way, where the cloud tops are blowing higher, partly because the eye has crumbled, and so usually that it really when the eye structure collapses, it all gets brought back together and throws up loads more cloud tops, but also because it's over land, so you've also got to add the ground elevation that will push those clouds just a little bit higher as well. Minus 80-degree cloud tops usually indicate a cloud height of around 55, maybe 60,000 feet. So that's generally what we were looking at when we're looking at these cloud tops. It really depicts how high they are based on the temperatures that we're looking at. let's see if there's any new imagery on radar. Radar definitely shows landfall has occurred, and that was probably at about, if we're to follow radar, probably about 20 to 30 minutes ago, I would say. So definitely a landfall at this point. Satellite suggested that it happened a bit earlier. We'll have to wait and see whether it is actually east of that, all that convection. But here is some of that radar. And you can see Dingalan there, very close, if not inside the eye. And just remarkable. I wasn't aware, but you can actually hear the noise from Ike's camera as well. I couldn't hear that earlier. So you know it, usual kinds of sounds there. Rainfall all over the place, it would seem. But not a huge amount of anything going on there right now. And that is in Laguna, which is still at Ike's location. That's around 125 kilometers from the center of the typhoon. It is a small storm, so some areas might get away with it, but places I'm really concerned about right now are, well, the places that are visible there on that radar: Palayan, Cabanatuan, and towards Tarlac City, and Gapan as well. All of those areas could get an I-pass, and definitely most likely an eye-wall pass. The strongest winds are still probably around the northeastern side or northern side of the storm. Radar is looking increasingly sloppy. I know that radar isn't the best in the world, but you get a general idea as to what we're seeing there as the northern side of the storm passes over. What's that location? Dingalan and Gabaldon. They're probably getting the worst deal out of this storm at this moment in time. Once again, if you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air, please send them in. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. I don't know how long we'll be staying for on this stream, but probably 2 or 3 hours. We are pretty worn out after this whole endeavour. But rest assured that even after we go off the air, that we also have an automated stream that's currently live, and that shows you satellite imagery of the storm 24 hours a day on Noru as it continues to move through the Philippines. If you've just joined us, Typhoon Noru, Philippine name Karding, made landfall in eastern Luzon in the very southern extremity of Aurora province, around 7 kilometers south of Dingalan, sometime in the last hour to half hour, depending on whether you trust satellite or radar, but certainly at least half an hour ago, and is now moving inland over southernmost Aurora towards, I think it's towards Bulacan, was it? I'm still getting familiar with all of the locations. So actually, when you look at that landfall zone, I think the Signal 5 warning should have been nudged northwards a little bit, really. Because landfall occurred a little bit further north than the Signal 5 consensus, and it's the centre of the storm is probably moving into Nueva Ecija right now. Eventually it will then move on to Tarlac, and then on to possibly northern Zambales, before moving right out over the Gulf of Mexico, and then it will start, or have the opportunity to start strengthening again. Nitin says, what is the current expected maximum wind speed in Angeles, or it might be Angeles, I'm still not sure on the pronunciation on that one, but of course that is in Pampanga province, I believe. and I expect that location you'll probably get typhoon conditions definitely, and maybe winds in excess of 160 kilometers per hour, the worst case scenario. The next storm after Noru on GFS, would that strengthen into the next named storm, question mark? That was a comment there. And there is a storm coming as well. It's not headed for the Philippines, but let's just go back to the wide shot of the Western Pacific. It actually looked much better earlier today, but you can see some disturbed weather over there towards the right hand side of the image. Maybe it's a little bit further off to the right. That might go on to affect the Mariana Islands, but it's definitely going to be moving more northerly and will go nowhere near the Philippine Islands or indeed anywhere else apart from the Ogasawara Islands of Japan. Heinz says, why is it not raining heavily in northern Metro Manila right now? Interesting question. Let me see if I can find any clues on the satellite and maybe radar imagery. Radar shows that area is getting some significant rainfall though right now. You're in some yellows and some oranges. So I don't know, if you're not getting it right now, maybe you're just in a small little gap, but I expect that Manila will be getting lots of heavy rain throughout the course of this evening. And it will probably start to taper off a little bit in, I don't know, it's very hard to tell looking at this radar quality. Maybe in 3 or 4 hours, don't quote me on that. But the satellite would suggest that the worst conditions should be near its peak in Manila, and then a couple of hours it will start to abate a little bit. Right then. Angeles. Okay, I'll remember that one. When will Noru go over the South China Sea? So we expect that will happen within 12 hours. Possibly even quicker than that with the way it's going. So I would say by morning you'll see the storm enter the South China Sea. Another comment, after 96W forms, do you think there'll be another invest or area of interest forming in the Western Pacific? And the answer to that is absolutely. There is an increasing model support and increase in the potential intensity on the GFS model of another new storm only about 4 days away in the eastern part of the South China Sea, just off western Luzon, that rapidly intensifies over the South China Sea and moves northwestwards and strikes the coast of China, possibly as another powerful typhoon, hot on the heels of Noru. So a lot going on. I'll show you that in a few moments. More comments. Is the worst happening in Metro Manila, or is there still expected further deterioration of the situation here? I can't say for sure because the quality of the imagery we've got isn't great. But I would suggest that the worst conditions are probably, well, put it this way, the storm is right now at its closest pass to Manila. It will start to move away very shortly. So I would say that Manila is probably at its worst at this moment in time, and it will probably start to improve slowly in the next 2 to 3 hours, and then hopefully get much better after that. Let's see what else we have. I don't think there's anything major right now. And another comment, did Noru have an eye wall replacement cycle earlier? Well, it was more a case of the eye completely getting, or the eye wall getting destroyed by wind shear. The eastern side of the eye wall had real problems, and the eye eventually shrank and collapsed. That allowed the storm to weaken quite a bit, but it is still a Category 4 with winds of 130 miles per hour or 210 kilometers per hour, sustained winds, and an estimated pressure of around 938. I'll bring up the models in just a short moment, and we'll be able to take a look at what's next for this storm and that other storm that might form in the South China Sea in a few days. If you find our stream useful, please share it. We are doing our best with providing the latest information, and it's great to have the community interaction, everyone coming together to provide their take on what the current situation is with the storm. If you do have any information on the ground, please let us know if it's safe to do so, and we'll be here to take a look at everything as it continues. But as we said, we're expecting maximum rain, well, I wouldn't say maximums actually, but rainfall of possibly 500 millimeters in one or two isolated spots of central Luzon. And I think quite a large area could get 200 millimeters or higher as well. You can also discuss this storm in real time on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13. That's where a lot of our community gather to talk about the whole tropical scene. And a question there from Random17. Do you think that Noru will be stronger in post-season analysis? No, I don't. There could even be a chance that it might be slightly weaker in post-season analysis, maybe, at least from the 175 miles per hour that our analyst team went with. I'm not quite sure whether that is going to continue to stand, but I don't know, maybe. What will really be assessed, though, is that rate of intensity. Our team came out with the preliminary information last night and said that it was probably the 5th fastest intensification rate ever in a tropical cyclone. When you consider that our tropical cyclone database contains nearly 15,000 different storms since records began, for it to be 5th is quite something, and unfortunately happened to coincide with its close approach and run up to the coast of the Philippines. Let's go back to the live imagery from our team member Ike, who is showing us the view from Laguna, around 125 kilometers away from the eye of the storm. Persistent rain we can just about hear in the background, and every so often some strong breezes, but nothing too crazy there at that location, quite clearly. And that, I guess, is a testament to how small this storm is. In southern Laguna, they're probably barely getting tropical storm force gusts, perhaps. But you change that by 50 kilometers up to the northern part of Metro Manila, then you're looking at possibly typhoon force gusts that are occurring at this time. Let's take a look at the GFS model then, and this is what it initializes the storm at 6C, which is quite a while ago now, but it initialized the storm with only 108 to 110 miles per hour, much weaker than it actually is. Initialization, and then what happened to it? There it is. Sorry, it was just a bit jumpy there. So the storm weakening dramatically as it moves inland. GFS thinks it will go all the way down to tropical storm status there. That green area, that's tropical storm force winds. And when we zoom out to look at the whole area, what happens next? Still jumpy because it's still loading in some of the some more frames. Let's just wait a moment here before that fully loads in. More comments then whilst we wait for that. Melvin says, did the high oceanic heat content in the east of the Philippines contribute to the rapid intensification of Noru? I'll be pretty sure that it did, as well as the very high sea surface temperatures in the first place, 30 degrees plus. And the small size of the storm certainly means that the chances of a rapid intensification phase, an extreme one like this, is elevated. And a question there as to whether the typhoon is making landfall on Bulacan. I think it's actually going to be a bit further north than that. Slightly. but Signal 5 warnings are in effect for that area, and it's going to get extremely testing very shortly. Can the South China Sea spawn a Category 5 storm? Sometimes it can, it's very rare, and I doubt this one will. We'll be able to go through this imagery now. So there it is as a tropical storm, re-intensifying. GFS wants it to become a typhoon again there, and a significant one, at least a Category 2, possibly a Category 3 landfall there in Vietnam, and that landfall location looks to be very close to Da Nang. And then after that, a much larger storm as well. If you notice the difference here, when you look at that tropical storm force wind field, it extends all the way up the Lisu Peninsula in China. That's sort of the idea of that wind field, and compare it to right now. Wow, massive increase in size that occurs from the storm currently to the storm later on. And that's what happens when a storm makes landfall. You generally see a restructuring of the storm, and that makes it much larger usually, and it may well have a more picturesque eye when it gets to this later point of the model forecast there. I mean, that's showing a Category 3, it looks like to me. That looks like a Category 3, and maybe some slight weakening just before landfall, but we're looking at possibly a Category 2 or maybe a Category 3 landfall there near Da Nang. Very quickly dies off. But then watch this. So that landfall, by the way, is on the 28th, the evening of the 28th, which is, what day is that? That is Wednesday. So the evening of Wednesday landfall. Then what happens next? This little feature here starts to appear. And you see a little bit of wind blowing off there. A little bit of a spiral starting up. That's off the coast of western Luzon, of course. That's on Thursday, and by Friday... No, there's Friday. It's a tropical storm, another tropical storm that forms in the South China Sea. And what happens to that one on the GFS? Well, it goes and intensifies and becomes another typhoon, and a major typhoon. Look at that. That's at least a Category 3 storm moving into Hainan Island. And that is the forecast for next Sunday. So we could have another busy weekend next weekend tracking that storm if that forecast comes to fruition. And then even later in the model run, there's a little tropical storm that tries to form down near Mindanao. You can see that little tropical storm signature there. That's a week on Tuesday, so that's a little while off, and that could change. But a small, weak tropical storm moving through the Philippines again, through the whole Visayas region, and then a compact typhoon. So you get a small feeling of deja vu there, because as we remember, Noru was only forecasted to be a tropical storm from the GFS in the early runs when it was around here as a weak tropical storm. GFS, no, actually it was up here more like. The GFS wanted it to blow through northern Luzon, but it didn't, of course. It's ended up going further down here, and the part where it really started to explode was around here, and then it just went rapid intensification, peaked around here, and made landfall now as we know it has around here. So the track movement turned westerly and now a little bit northwesterly, and then we expect it to go maybe a bit back down towards the south again, and then on towards Vietnam. That's the Gtwc forecast, although the GFS there has it slightly further north, pretty much taking it in a straight line towards Da Nang. So that's really an evaluation of that model run right now. That's the latest GFS. There are other models out there that I don't have the ability to show on this setup that I've got right now, but I don't know if any of our other members could show the other models. Jose, do you have that at all?
I don't think so right now. I'll try.
But I imagine they'll be saying pretty similar stuff, though. As we look at the latest satellite imagery, really impressive cloud tops continuing there, and I would say probably more than we would expect now. Another convective burst, I suppose that is. So watch out, because underneath that convective burst, that's a sign there's a lot of energy. Definitely very high rain rates, and that area is pretty much all the area around Nueva Ecija, northern Bulacan and Tarlac. Looks like they're set to get a lot of rainfall in the next few hours. What I don't have here is satellite derived rainfall, which is something that I would love to show you, and I might be able to get up a little bit later on, but I just don't have it yet. So let's go back to the latest radar imagery. And radar is usually much better than satellite, although the quality of this radar isn't great. Just saying that right now. New frame there, that suggests that the ice has completely collapsed as it's moved into land and is getting even more difficult to spot. Nonetheless, a lot of red zones there that are reaching land, and that obviously denotes very high rain rates. This is Force 13 Live. Typhoon Noru has made landfall in the eastern part of Luzon. That's the very southern extent of Aurora province, around 7 kilometers south of Dingalan. And that happened about an hour ago now, depending on which source you go by. If you look at radar, which isn't the best radar source in the world, it was about 50 minutes ago, and by satellite it was probably just over an hour ago. But the landfall site, there's pretty good agreement there between radar and satellite exactly where it was, probably within just a few kilometers of Dingalan, which is in southern Aurora. Let's see if we can spot some more imagery sources for, there's the close-up geocolor imagery. And that goes to show once again some of the very high amounts of convection over the center of the storm. And a reminder that Signal 5 warnings remain in effect for a chunk of the main island there, extending inland over southern Nueva Ecija, northern Bulacan and easternmost Pampanga provinces. I'm going to try and get some more imagery that we can show everyone, because there's not been very much different imagery sources that we've shown today. There has been some ongoing imagery issues on a lot of the Himawari sources, so we are limited in the first place as to what imagery we can show you. Like, we are severely limited actually. There really isn't many more satellite products that I can show you without going to another site that will take quite a while to load. But I'm going to try and get there, because it is important to see some other perspectives, especially with rainfall estimates. So I'm just going to try and get this up as quickly as I can, but it will take a little while. In the meantime, we can keep looking at that live satellite imagery. And every new frame that comes in there, we get that straight away. And a big blow up of convection in those later frames that we're currently looking at right now. And that is doubtless going to lead to higher rainfall estimates near the center. Alright, a lot of clicking later, and we are nearly there. Alright, so if I cross over to my screen once again, we can take a look at the current rainfall estimates and everything that's going on again. So, just make that a bit more transparent so you can see the land behind. That imagery is loading in, and what you'll note here is that the sort of purple colours, that's a rainfall of around 50 millimeters per hour rain rate. Over Manila right now, there's actually a little gap opening up near there, so rain rates are dropping. Rain rates in Manila there at around 5 to 10 millimeters per hour, so not too crazy. You can quite clearly see the main area that we're concerned about, which is under that big blow up. And to be honest with you, the more I look at this imagery, the more I look at this imagery, the more right it appears that PAGASA might be, with their signal 5 warnings being a little bit south of the storm's centre, because the storm's centre right now is probably, let me just try and figure this out. I'm not even sure anymore, the imagery has changed so much. Actually, I would say at the centre of the storm right now is somewhere around here, very close to Gapan City. Let's put a timestamp on this. What time was that? 9:30 p.m. is that area there, very close to Gapan City, is where I currently believe that the centre of the storm is right now, or as of 9:30. So when you look at that, the rain is concentrated really on the south and eastern side of the centre of the typhoon. The northern side really getting away with not very much rain so far. I imagine you'll still be getting strong winds up there. But you look at some of those locations. Bongabon, Talavera, San Jose City, Guimba are possibly getting a better deal than expected so far, we hope. I've no way of knowing actually what's going on the ground, of course, unless someone lets us know. But that's what the indications from above are possibly showing right now. Really, really high cloud tops blowing up again as this storm moves over land, and it's still over plains at the moment, so we shouldn't really expect this much of a cloud top blow up. So that really suggests to me that this storm is blowing up a new bout of convection rather than the land and the terrain alone pushing up those cloud tops. Let's see if we've got some more questions, and feel free to send them in. Obviously, I might not get to all of them because there is a lot going on in the chat. Anemo says, would Noru move a more northern track, southern track, or just straight westward? Well, it appears right now that straight westward is becoming more favourable. Let me bring up that Gtwc cone again in one of my different tabs. There it is. So you can see on the Gtwc they're expecting it pretty much arrow straight westwards, although notably a slight west-northwest movement through Luzon before it starts to settle more on a westward movement over the South China Sea. Once again, they're expecting a 100 knot peak, that's 115 miles per hour, and then moving inland over Vietnam, over southern Laos, and over northern Thailand. There's also a few questions about Ian, and of course we are monitoring two storms at the same time. It can get very busy here and difficult when we talk about two storms at once, but we've got to show it. Here is Ian, and even though it is lacking in convection quite a bit, the rotation is looking very good, and I can see there's quite a big future for this storm when you look at it there. Still rather weak at the moment, 50 miles per hour from the National Hurricane Center, and they expect it to become a major hurricane by the time it reaches western Cuba, possibly even Category 4, and then into the Gulf of Mexico, and then possibly, well, probably along the coast of Florida, and could still be a major hurricane by the time it gets there. We'll be covering that a lot more in the next few days. Some more questions here. Why is Typhoon Noru still moving slowly? Well, actually, the forecast potentially called for a little bit of slower movement as it was moving over land, but it isn't moving that slowly. Since landfall, over the course of an hour and a half, it's probably moved a good 45 kilometers. So current movement is still about 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, which is what it was yesterday or this morning when we were looking at it approaching as a monstrous category 5 with a really distinct eye and eyeball. So it is a concern, obviously, with the amount of rain that's falling, that we just want to get it out of the way as quickly as possible, really. But it is still moving rather slightly above average. Usually normal motion for storms is about 15 miles an hour, just over 20 kilometers per hour, and it's a little bit higher than that. What category is Noru? Well, right now it is a category 4 still on the Saffir-Simpson scale until our team do any other updates. I imagine they will downgrade it eventually. They actually in the last update went with 130 miles per hour at 940 millibars, so just 2 more millibars up there. And George says PAGASA now placed Metro Manila at red rainfall warning, which is torrential rainfall and the highest rainfall warning. That would not surprise me. Well, actually, no, maybe it would, because when we look back at that imagery, I mean, okay, this is a satellite estimate, but it does show those rainfall amounts lessening over Manila. They have had quite a bit up until now, but as far as I can see here, it looks like it could be starting to taper off a little bit. Maybe another little bout in a couple of hours. But the main area you can see there, those darker colours, San Miguel, Gapan City, and what was that other location as well that's partially cut off by the text? Cabanatuan City, and Tarlac, possibly, and Angeles, and possibly San Fernando could get significant rainfall amounts coming up very shortly, as well as those very strong winds that could be gusting above 200 kilometers per hour. Of course, when we think back, it should only have really been a tropical storm or a category 1 landfall, but here we are. Things never seem to go to plan, and this was a category 4 landfall that has occurred. Signal 5 warnings are still in effect for parts of Luzon. There's that warning map once again, the Polillo Islands, northernmost Quezon, southernmost Aurora, southern Nueva Ecija, northern half of Bulacan, and the easternmost part of Pampanga. This is Force 13 Live. We'll continue to take your comments and questions live on the air, just like we are right now. Is it unusual for such explosive intensification for Noru? Absolutely. As explained earlier, our analysis team rated the intensification of Noru as the 5th fastest on record for any tropical cyclone in the world. So yeah, it was definitely an anomaly. How long will Noru stay inland? Probably for another 6 hours or so. If I was to extrapolate its movement, and if it's moving at about 30 kilometers per hour, it's got about 115 kilometers until it exits the coast. So you could even be looking at 4 hours until it moves offshore again, unless it slows down a little bit. And let me just see if there's some other news just quickly. The ATCF system have gone with 130 miles per hour and a pressure of 932 at their latest update. So that's what we'll be seeing from the Gtwc at their 15Z update, which is coming up in an hour's time. Also in an hour we'll get a new update on Tropical Storm Ian, so Atlantic watchers, stay tuned for that. But the next hour we'll be covering more on Typhoon Noru as it moves inland over central Luzon. Our live coverage will continue in a moment. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Welcome back to our coverage on Typhoon Noru, Philippine name Karding. It made landfall just over an hour ago, possibly an hour and a half ago, and is now moving well inland over central Luzon, as you can clearly see on this satellite imagery. Really blown up a massive convective burst in the last hour there. You saw the ice structure quite clearly in those first frames, and then a massive blow up that's completely engulfed all of that as it's moved inland. This storm has winds estimated at 130 miles per hour. That is 210 kilometers per hour, sustained with higher gusts, and an estimated central pressure of 938 millibars, probably 940 now actually, from our latest team update. Gtwc though, probably going with 932 at their update, which they're about to release. At the end of this hour, we will have updates probably from the Gtwc, but definitely from the National Hurricane Center on where we stand with Tropical Storm Ian. So for our American viewers, we'll be watching that one closely as well. So 2 major storms to be tracking in real time once again in this hour of coverage. Let's throw you back again to the latest map from PAGASA, and that will show you where all of those warnings currently are right now, and you can see there Signal 5 warnings still in effect for the Polillo Islands, and for, well, let me just first check whether this is still completely up to date. That was from 8 PM, so it should be. There it is. So Signal 5 warnings remain for northern Quezon, southernmost Aurora, which is where it made landfall, southern Nueva Ecija, northern half really of Bulacan, the eastern part of Pampanga. Signal 4 warnings extending out to the west coast, where the storm will exit in about 4 to 6 hours at this rate, near Zambales. Southern Pangasinan, Tarlac, the rest of Pampanga, Bulacan, Rizal, northern Laguna, part of Quezon, northern Bataan, and another area of southern Aurora. Signal 3 extending even further north there into parts of Nueva Vizcaya, and on the southern side, Cavite, Laguna, and the southern part of Bataan. Metro Manila, Signal 3 on the south side, Signal 4 in the northern parts. Signal 2 warning still all the way out to Catanduanes. I expect they'll start to relinquish that soon. And Signal 1 warnings even down to Sorsogon and Masbate, as well as for the northern part of the island of Mindoro. In the studio once again, my name is Nathan Foy, taking us through the coverage on this storm over the course of probably another hour or two. It's been a very long day for the Philippines, in which we saw this storm peak as a Category 5 with winds of 175 miles per hour a little bit earlier on this morning. Then wind shear started to get to it from the eastern side, and it really came in for us there after the ridiculous intensification rate of the storm. Wind shear induced weakening as it started to pull the eastern structure of the storm apart, and then the ice shrank, and then it almost completely disappeared, and then there it is making landfall still as a Category 4 as it reached the southernmost part of Aurora. The landfall location was very close to a small town, I think, called Dingalan in the southern part of Aurora, and that landfall we estimate occurred at about 9:15 PM. Our analyst team actually put the landfall at 8:30. So, you know, generally in that ballpark was when the landfall actually occurred. Check that latest satellite imagery and you'll see this big massive blow up of convection. How does that translate to rain rates? Well, we have a little bit of an idea, a better idea, as we look at the satellite derived rainfall estimates. Now I know it's colourful, but all of the colours we see here, just reloading all of that imagery. So any green area that you see there is 5 millimeters of rain per hour. Then into the yellow, that's around 15 millimeters of rain per hour. And then you get to the orange and sort of rose colour. And then you get deep red, which is 40. And you can see some purples in there as well, or violet. And that's around 50 millimeters of rain per hour. Now these images are at 15-minute intervals. So let's just slow it down slightly. If you see an area that gets a purple colour for 4 frames in a row, then that will have been 50 millimeters of rain in that hour. So 4 frames per hour on this imagery, and that 9:30 p.m. point, that's where we estimate the centre of the storm to be at that time. And that shows that the convective blow-up and the rain rates, well actually the convective blow-up is completely different to the rain rate chart, which is interesting. But clearly it shows that the heaviest rain is probably on the eastern side of the centre and the southern side. A few little bursts of heavy rain for the Metro Manila area there. And this imagery goes back to, how long is that? Goes back around 4 hours or so. General movement appears to be just north of west. Or possibly due west, actually. If that 9:30 p.m. position is correct. It actually looks like due west to me. And so the exit point, name your location. It's going to be somewhere in Zambales, but exactly which location, not sure. Maybe Masinloc, Palauig, Iba, Botolan further down. And I can see on that map there's a pin that says High Peak. So there's some mountains on the west coast. I'm not sure how high they are, but that could just mess up this storm a little bit more before it exits the Philippine Islands. We're expecting a new JTWC cone probably in about an hour's time. This was what the last cone looked like as of nearly 6 hours ago. And I don't think that the forecast will change very much at the next update. So those watching from Vietnam, look at this. You can see almost a due west motion. And the JTWC, they're expecting a landfall to occur probably near Tam Kee. The GFS model expecting the storm to move a bit further north and strike near Da Nang. JTWC there going with a 115 mile per hour category 3 landfall for Vietnam when it gets there. And that will be in around 2.5 days, that landfall occurring on the JTWC's forecast. Local time and date, it would be on Tuesday evening. Actually no, it would be on Wednesday. Wednesday during the day, as far as I can tell there. So that's what we have there for Vietnam. We're also here to take your questions, of course, for another hour of coverage here, and we are ready and waiting. Start your message with Force 13 all in text on our live coverage. We'll have updates on Tropical Storm Ian at the end of the hour from the National Hurricane Center as well in the Atlantic. So do bear with us at times. We are covering 2 systems at the same time. Here's some comments, more comments here. For those who are concerned with Marikina River's level in Metro Manila, it's now at 16 meters, which will trigger second of 3 alarms. Next is 18 meters, apparently. Why does the JTWC have the storm strengthening over Vietnam? Question mark. It doesn't. It has the storm weakening before Vietnam, actually. Will the eye of Noru come back? I'm pretty sure it will. And probably bigger. After that storm moves over landfall, it has to reorganize itself again as it enters the South China Sea. And then we'll start to see a new structure, which almost always results in a larger eye. As we saw earlier, it also results in a larger wind field when you look at this GFS forecast. Just to point out again, the initial position and the initial wind field there, that green area, that's wind field. And when you take a look through the storm further on in its life, look how much larger it gets with those wind fields, those green areas. Becomes enormous. There's that wind field change, and if you look at the eye, I mean, it's barely a dot there. It can't even resolve it properly, the GFS model, because of its low resolution, and the eye is so small. And by the end of that loop, the eye becomes quite a bit bigger in comparison as well. Fascinating to look as that moves through. And just to note there, another storm emerging on the day 5 period. This thing here, a new tropical storm, likely to form on Thursday, Friday in the East China Sea, in the South China Sea near the western part of Luzon, and then becoming another major typhoon and possibly affecting Hainan Island, really large as well as it moves up there. That shouldn't affect the Philippines, but you can see on the western coast there, those storm force winds do get pretty close. So I would monitor that one closely as well. But in the meantime, dealing with one major storm is enough, and Noru is that right now. Philippine named Karding. This storm made landfall with winds of around 130 miles per hour, sustained winds, that's 210 kilometers per hour, and a central pressure of 938 millibars. It's weakening a little bit more now, and the rainfall amounts will still be quite impressive over these parts of Luzon. We could see localized amounts to 500 millimeters. I would say in the Manila area we're probably going to be expecting 200 millimeters, maybe a little bit more than that. Most of it will have already occurred. And further north in northern Luzon we're also looking at potentially some significant rainfall, but maybe not quite as much, especially near the northern tip where you'll be seeing probably less than 50. Some comments. The eye of Karding was impressive at peak. We had a pinhole. We did at one point. Yeah, it was a very, very powerful storm. And here to talk about it again with us now is one of our top analysts, Soham, who joins us from your location in India. What did you think of of Noru's peak earlier on yesterday, and where we're at with it right now?
Well, if I were to say something, it would definitely be surprising, but not in the way you would think. I was looking at it like 3 days ago, and I was looking at the environment, and I thought it would definitely intensify quite a substantial bit. What I was not expecting was how quickly it would intensify.
Now, our team suggested, and I don't know if you've revised it or done any checks or anything like that, but you were quoted as saying that it was the 5th fastest intensification rate on record for any tropical cyclone. 15,000 cyclones in the database. That's
cyclone.
Oh really? Just the Western
Any
Pacific?
tropical cyclone. I'm talking in the last 10 years.
Oh, in the last 10 years.
Yeah. If I were to go over my notes again, the first on the list is Patricia at 105 knots in 24 hours. In second and third place, it's a tie between Hagibis and Ambali at 100 knots in 24 hours. Fourth in the list is Ernie of 2017 at 95 knots in 24 hours. And fifth on the list is Noru at 90 knots in 24 hours.
So, 90 knots in 24 hours. Wow, that's impressive. I would say it's even
45
more.
knots at 18, it's at 6 p.m. UTC day before yesterday. to 135 knots at 6 p.m. UTC yesterday.
I would say it'd be even more impressive to see what the 12-hour rate was. I think that was even higher, wasn't it?
Oh, the 12-hour rate was forget about the 12-hour rate. The 6-hour rate was pretty high. If I were to look at the drop from GTWC's data, according to their data, it dropped 43 millibars in pressure in 6 hours, which is an
Wow.
average rate of 7.16 millibars per hour.
That's quite tremendous. Reminds me of some of the really historic typhoons when you think of that. What do you think? Well, first of all, we're stuck here, aren't we? We're back to square one almost when it comes to forecasting storms because no one saw this rapid intensification coming. Is there any way that we'll be able to foresee storms like this better in the future?
Well, the first thing I would probably note is that in the subjective Dvorak technique, there's a particular line in the presentation, which is which is about forecasting intensities. That rule, there are total of 7 different rules in forecasting intensity. I'll put your attention to the sixth rule, which is what happens when a developing cyclone leaves an unfavorable environment. In this case, what happened with Noru was that Noru was in a period of rather high easterly shear, and it had its low level circulation pretty partially exposed. Now, what happened was shear lessened, and the system quickly developed a central dense overcast and began intensifying. So, according to this presentation, it recommends forecasting an increase of 1 T number in Dvorak per day, which is pretty high. And it's also backed by research that storms that emerge out of a high shear environment, which are
Hmm.
developing, tend to rapidly intensify more often than most people think. So definitely, I think more research needs to be done into this regard, because Noru was a pretty small storm, and combining a small storm with this rule, the storm underwent a pretty explosive phase of intensification, which I and most people were really caught unaware because most people were more busy tracking other storms around the world.
Was it smaller than Goni?
It's hard to say because I don't really have a Goni's imagery with me on hand at the moment, but it's definitely on par at least in size.
Hmm. Rather small, and it was a big worry when we were looking at it this morning as an extremely powerful Category 5, and it was barreling slightly south of west. And if it kept going like that, it could have given Manila major typhoon winds. As it stands right now, Manila
Yeah,
might be getting some typhoon gusts, but it looks like it's past its closest point to the capital. There will still be some significant rain, but I think the highest winds have probably now already been and now leaving in Manila.
thankfully, the storm was running slightly faster than forecast, so it outran its own upper level environment and then started getting sheared from the east. That combined with the IO replacement cycle it was starting definitely caused it to weaken more than anticipated. So that's a bit of good news there.
It absolutely was, and we saw it live. How fast is it going now? I believe it must still be somewhere around 30 kilometers per hour, so do you know?
The previous update was 12 knots. I'll have to convert that into kilometers per hour to check.
Well, that's not 30. It's less than that. Um, that's around
It's
22,
22.
22.
It's coming to around 22.
Hmm. If that's correct then, and it continues to move at 22 kilometers per hour, then just trying to get an idea of when it will leave the Philippines, then that would suggest
Uh,
another 5 hours then.
yeah, that's about right. Sounds about right.
I don't know, I think it might still be going a little bit faster than that, but we'll wait and see.
Eh, It's hard to tell just from satellite imagery.
It is now, and I'm struggling to get to grips with all of the radar images, and I don't know. I don't know which to believe at this point.
I've never actually seen the radar imagery. I did see it, but it was always slightly behind when I was looking at it.
It
Uh,
looks slightly behind, but it says here that it is up to date. So I don't know. I don't know what the thing is with it, but well, there we go.
might be some latency issues with the area being affected by winds.
All right, let's take some more questions. Start your message with 413 all in text. We're talking about Noru mainly, but we are aware, of course, that we'll have a new update on Ian in the next half an hour as well, so we'll bring that to you too. Falco says, why did the models tank so much for Noru?
This is a very good question, and it's been a recurring issue for models for a long time now. They simply cannot handle small storms.
Hmm.
A prominent exception is the HWRF, which has been pretty good, but that also majorly underestimated Noru's deepening rate. I believe it was still in the 970s when it began its rapid intensification. HWRF. Like the only good model that saw Noru's intensification coming was the GFS, and it had the storm in the
Early
930s.
on, but then it
Early on,
backed off
early on. Yeah, it completely backed off. In like 2 runs, it was
completely.
gone.
Yeah, it was gone, and then it never really caught back on again until it actually happened. Crazy.
I feel like something went wrong in between the initializations. Like I do remember Noah servers also crashed the run afterwards
Oh,
when the storm disappeared.
blimey. Once again, here is the PAGASA warning map. Signal 5 warnings remain in effect for Polillo Islands, the northernmost part of Quezon, the southernmost part of Aurora, the southern part of Nueva Ecija, northern Bulacan, eastern Pampanga, and also the northern tip of Rizal. Keep sending in your messages. Jessica says, is it possible to reach Florida? I assume you're talking about Ian, and the answer is definitely yes. We'll talk about that a little
That
bit
is
more.
what the NHC forecast calls for.
What's that, sorry?
That is what the NHC forecast cone was calling for, I think, reaching Florida.
Yeah, we'll see what it says in the next update, which is going to obviously be interesting. Please tell us what's going to be the status of Abra in the Philippines, in the northern part of Luzon. Well, you can see it up there. It's a signal 1 warning right now, so you'll be expecting some gusty winds, strong breezes up to near tropical storm strength, possibly. Rainfall, I would say isolated maximums of 100 millimeters up there, but generally it's going to be quite a bit less. So it shouldn't be too bad over there in Abra. Lava Command says, if the typhoon got that strong that fast and we didn't predict it, the Caribbean Sea has the same conditions. Shouldn't we be worried about Ian if this wasn't forecasted?
If I mean, the NHC has definitely noted it. I do know that they have noted this in their discussions, and as a result, they have produced a forecast cone that is actually pretty unprecedented in terms of intensification. If I don't think I have it with me, I may have it with me, but there was a chart which was produced by one prominent meteorologist who noted that for all these Atlantic storms that have been forecasted in terms of having forecast cones produced for that were 35 knots or less, the Ian's forecast was the most aggressive out of all of them
Wow,
ever made.
that's fascinating. Although I'd be interested to
Let me
see
see if I can
what they
find
would
it.
say for
Would be
45 knot
fascinating
storms.
would be fascinating if I was able to show it. Let me see if I can find it.
In the meantime, we'll take questions on either of these two storms, two major impact potentials. One of them which is already happening in the form of Noru, and that's why we're giving it tons more coverage right now. But of course, we are obviously mindful about the implications for Ian and everyone watching that one as well. National Hurricane Center will update this hour. As soon as we get that information, we will relay it to you. But Wick says, before the 2022 West Pacific season ends, do you think something like this will happen? A catastrophic strong storm? What, another one? Well, it's always possible, and I think that might well happen, given how backloaded this season might end up being. We're also joined by another one of our...
I found the graphic. I've posted in the live output for if you want to check it out.
Alright. That is an interesting graphic. That's the National Hurricane Center forecast for all tropical storms prior to below 40 knots. And Ian is definitely an outlier. We're also joined by Kenneth right now, also on our analyst team, so we've got two of our best brains here right now to tell us about both of these storms, mainly Noru though. Kenneth, why don't you tell us your thoughts about what we've seen in the last 24 hours?
So sure. Now currently Noru has made landfall in the Philippines, and its eye is just completely filled in satellite imagery because of light interaction and the earlier shear that weakens it from peak around 12 hours ago. So it peaked at around 0 UTC with its most impressive appearance, pretty much at 20 degrees Celsius eye, the negative 80 range CDO, a very mature structure that just pop out just like within 18 to 24 hours. It just shoots up from a shear system like 2 nights ago, when shear weakens and it formed a CDO like yesterday morning, and just when shear weakens it just popped up in extremely quickly, a Hall of Fame type of extreme development. That intensified 90 knots within just 24 hours, from 50 knots at 0Z 24th all the way to 25th 0Z at 140 to 150 knots from various estimates. But now it's currently weakened because of shear, but still not really an hour placement, but just shear. As seen in radar and microwave imagery. But still make landfall as a category 4, still, well, from various agency forecasts and models, is already unprecedented, although, well, our brain may not be really surprised that it will just bomb back. It will just rapidly intensify, just maybe not to such a rate that it will shoot up to category 5. Now, it should be feeling, any observations that we found that, the deterioration in the situation.
Are there any? I have no idea.
Still alright.
But what do you think about its future for the South China Sea towards Vietnam? Earlier this morning, the Gtwc forecasted a 140 mile an hour peak/landfall into Vietnam, and then they really backed down to 115 miles per hour at their last update. And let me just check if they've got a new update that might just... yes, they have a new update, and they are now saying, again, 115 miles per hour category 3 landfall. What are your thoughts on that, if any?
So, I'm seeing the model's consensus. Well, the intensity-wise, the initializations, well, some models have not been that good because it takes time to catch up from the previous extreme development that literally no models is wanting that. But based on a current pretty much like moderate shear environment, if I were to guess, the shear is expected to weaken, as at least the Philippines still pretty much will weaken, like to it's expected to leave the Philippines in the morning, early in the morning, as a like pretty much, because Luzon has a very high terrain, it just tears systems off. So I expect it to out as like a category 1 typhoon, is minimal typhoon. But as shear weakens again, it was the conditions in South China Sea a tropics area remains more or less favorable, while that area's motion remains literally untouched, nearly untouched in the past few months.
It
So,
has.
as it untouched in the past few months, there's just so many energy accumulated, and it's not completely lost because of the monsoon, because of the radio budget loss yet. So the energy is still a very sufficient power bank for another rapid development, pretty much in the next 24 hours. After it leaves the Philippines, about 24 hours for another wave of rapid development, I'll expect. But like how much I'll expect, like major is somewhat likely, and because the model would run, well, it will vary. It did vary significantly, though, because of various model runs and the initialization of different intensity. Like it is 140 not 12 hours ago, but it's like, oh, we can snip that currently. That could make difference to future model forecast after it leaves the Philippines. Yeah, because of the algorithm work. And then, but still, you see, I'll say a major is still pretty likely. A category
Looks
3
like
is
it.
a safe call. Yeah, a category 3 looks like a safe call, at least 115 right now to be safe. But I may expect higher. We can root a higher intensity again. Like category 3 is pretty much the solid point, and it is expected to strike Vietnam after 3 days.
As we're seeing on this forecast here from the GFS. And that second storm that becomes a typhoon later on in the South China Sea, chances increasing for that. The National Hurricane Center have published their latest update on Tropical Storm Gaston, which is defying the odds right now. They expected it to have gone post-tropical by now, but it is still fighting. Warnings have been lifted in the Azores, which it passed very close to, and it currently has winds of 50 miles per hour and a pressure of 997. National Hurricane Center now expect it to last another 12 hours. Another 24 hours before turning post-tropical, so they've given it another little lease of life here. Any quick comments on Gaston?
So Gaston, there's some like previously 24 hours ago, it's been completely sheared off into vortic convection. But now it just there's certain conditions from the upper level 8 that leads to the convection blow up thanks to some upper level work. There's some mid-level work that leads to convection blow up, and now to go to the surface and combine with the center. It does like look a bit of post-tropical like, but still more models and the and pretty much there's not much of a front side. The core is still more or less very symmetric and warm, despite the appearances look like that, but pretty much still warm, warm core, but will die soon because of the shear is actually not low.
Well, that was Gaston, still going in the Atlantic Ocean. But the main feature right now is still Typhoon Noru, which made landfall earlier as a 130 mile per hour Category 4 storm. Its landfall pressure was around 938 millibars according to our analyst team, which they've since upped it a little bit to 940 millibars. More convection blowing up over the centre of the storm, and it appears to be just crashing again a little bit as it balloons outwards in all directions, I suppose. So I reckon that was definitely a convective burst, and the mountains of Zambales could further weaken the storm a little bit, and then it will enter the South China Sea. It might take some time for the structure, the centre, to sort itself out once again, but after that there could be more chances for rapid intensification across the South China Sea. We are awaiting momentarily the latest update for Tropical Storm Ian from the National Hurricane Center. Let's just familiarise us with what the last cone looked like before now, and you can see it. They were forecasting a Category 4, was it, in Cuba? a Category 3 actually, becoming a Category 4 as it moved over Cuba, and then moving through the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico and weakening quite substantially as it was approaching the coast of Florida around the Big Bend. The main thing to take away about this, and hopefully my team will agree with me, is that if it deviates eastward and makes landfall in central Florida there, it will most likely be a very powerful hurricane. But if it does make landfall further north along the northern Gulf Coast, it will have quite a bit more time to weaken, and that might possibly happen. What do we think?
Well, I believe latest model indications was for an eastward trend. So it remains to be seen what happens from here on.
But I'm under the impression that if it goes north of Tampa, say, and heads towards the Big Bend area landfall, that wind shear will really start getting to it.
Yeah, considering I believe model soundings had the wind shear in the Big Bend area to be around 40 knots, which is pretty high. So it would definitely shed the storm out. So our best case scenario would be for the storm. Actually, the best case scenario is that the storm fail here and now. But if we get to that point, our best case scenario would be that the storm continue west of forecast cones.
There is the latest satellite imagery on Ian today. It's looking really good in terms of its rotation and its outflow. Just not as much convection as I would have thought at this point, but its structure, guys, I imagine you're pretty concerned when you look at that. It looks pretty well placed to rapidly intensify later on.
The main current hindrance to Ian is currently the fact that it's dealing with a dry intrusion, which has occurred from the northwest, I think. Yeah, northwest. It's still dealing with that, so it needs a little time to fully get going. Otherwise, latest recon data dropped a drop zone into the center of Ian and found a virtually completely stacked mid-level and low-level center. So its structure is pretty much there. It just needs time to reinitiate deep convection.
That update will be out shortly. Let's go back to Noru for the time being. Philippine name Karding, of course. This storm made a ferocious Category 4 landfall along the border with Aurora and Quezon, and is moving over the plains region of central Luzon and then towards the hillier area of Zambales, and then it will emerge out over the South China Sea in a matter of hours. So it appears quite clearly that Manila has probably now gone through the worst of what they'll get in the storm, and conditions might be slowly improving there now. Rain rates could still be quite high for a little while, but I would say the worst places now for the rain and possibly for the wind are places around Bulacan and eastern Pampanga, there it is, and southern Nueva Ecija, and possibly into Tarlac as well. That's my thoughts on it at this time. Still Signal 5 warnings in effect for some of those areas. It could still produce extremely powerful winds, but big concerns about flash flooding and landslides, definitely. Let's get some more questions. The Victor says, why has there been a massive convective blow-up over the core of Noru as it makes landfall?
Oh, that's probably due to...
Kenneth?
Oh, that's pretty much...
Go ahead.
Yeah. That's pretty much due to the terrain work, because terrain pretty much as the flow goes into land, it would just be forced to lift because terrain is higher, and with the force to lift, you have massive convergence and and you have massive rising activity, which will blow up some very cool cloud chops, and so as very pretty much that also amplify the rainfall as well. That you amplify the cloud chop, and pretty much like that in short.
Thank you for the thank you messages from one or two of our viewers, including EJDC. We appreciate it. We're here for you. And Sarkar says, is an eye emerging? I think they might be referring to Ian there.
Considering it's still lacking deep conviction, I'd lean towards a no.
Also trying to make sense of some of these other questions. Apparently the European model shows its strength more, Ian's strength, more in the Gulf than in the Caribbean. Can you see that happening? Is it a guarantee that we'll have a stronger Ian in the Gulf than it will be in the Caribbean?
Considering the shear forecast in the Gulf rises rather quickly, I would say unlikely.
And A Moment of Lovely sends us a message of support there as well. Thank you very much for that. And our coverage will continue for another hour after this before we get thrown back to our automated stream. Even when we finish up here today or tonight, when the stream ends, it will automatically redirect you to our automated feed of the typhoon moving over land. And pretty soon we'll be setting up pretty much after we finish here, we'll be setting up an automated feed for Ian as well later today as it starts to become more of an issue. Still no update from the National Hurricane Center at this moment in time. We're expecting it in the next 15 minutes. I don't suppose they're waiting for any recon information or anything like that, do we know?
Well, they like to take the time when it comes to investigating storms.
There is a recon plane near the storm.
NOAA 2 has
Vessels
just
is
left.
already out.
NOAA 2 just left. AF 301 still in storm. Now currently approaching the center from the southeast.
Ah, so they might try and get another center pass in, maybe, if there's enough time. Old Rock's Vlad Teeps says, can we get an update on Nueva Ecija and or Tarlac? Well, I mentioned a few moments ago that those areas could be getting some of the worst conditions right now. Probably extremely heavy high winds of over 160 kilometers per hour sustained. And I expect that there'll be some significant rainfall there as well. Let's hop back to the satellite-derived rain rates, and you'll once again be able to see, as soon as I can find the right button, what it looks like. And you will note here that parts of those two areas that you mentioned, and actually, if you look at that, just in the last few moments near Bongabon, there's been an enormous peak in the rain rates there, off the charts as a matter of fact. That is up to about, that's 75 millimeters per hour in that location. Here, 75 millimeters per hour, just for a short moment. Can't even think of what I'm typing. So that's what we've just seen there. If that maintains for 4 frames in a row, then that is a full hour, and that is 75 millimeters. Extremely high rain rates. It's off the charts for a reason. So I would be very concerned about that area. This isn't a guarantee to be completely accurate. This is satellite derived, but it usually gives you a general idea of what might be happening in there. At the moment it shows a rainfall profile. Areas such as Cabanatuan City, Talavera, Tarlac, Gapan, all getting really big rainfall rain rates right now. And the higher the rain rate, the more chance for flash flooding. Let's see if we have some more questions. How big is Tropical Storm Ian now?
Well, if we're talking in terms of wind field size, it's still pretty small, but in terms of influence, it is pretty large.
It is. There was also a comment regarding Noru stalling, I think. Whether it could stall in the South China Sea and intensify into an actual major. Well, it could do that without stalling, honestly.
Yeah, it's not expected to stall. The steering current is very apparent, and the mid-level ridge is still very strong, extending way to the west at the South China coast, which brings a very stable steering all the way westward towards the Vietnam.
Because the ridging is pretty strong, so and it's not expected to break over it, so it's not expected to stall, so that it can go north. Nothing of the sort is going to happen.
You'll also notice on the Gtwc forecast cone that the wind field really grows when it moves over the South China Sea as well. Storm pretty much doubles in size according to that forecast.
Yeah. So they're pretty much the current two factors that can lead to expansion. The first of all, the core right now just being eroded somewhat due to land interaction that could result in an expanding size because of the weakening. As it needs to keep its momentum, it has to expand its radius of maximum width. That means enlarge its eye wall to stabilize itself, because large systems are less prone to conditions. And then you also may have some weak northeast monsoon that brings the winds up at near the South China coast, which makes an even more growth in the gale radius, and especially rain bands in the northern side. That's also kind of likely, I'll say, that cuming effect may occur.
And we were speaking about the potential landfall intensity in Vietnam earlier. Rapid intensification still likely over there, and Kenneth mentioned Category 3 pretty much a given, and possibly higher. We're just playing for time here whilst we wait for the National Hurricane Centre's latest forecast, which is due any time. As soon as that comes out, we'll let you know if there's been any changes to that. Of course, we are covering two storms at the same time. Typhoon Noru, that's moving inland over the central Philippines with still Category 4 winds possibly, and Tropical Storm Ian, which is still gathering itself together. I think it looks pretty good on that latest imagery, rotating nicely, just lacking some of that convection. Any indication as to what recon are actually finding in there? Is it consistent with 50 miles per hour?
Actually, it was consistent with 40.
40?
Yeah. We've pretty much been a little more aggressive than usual, but that's generally a question for post analysis.
Always is, indeed. National Hurricane Center will not, they would not weaken this storm on their operational forecast because they don't want people letting their guard down, and unfortunately that is what happens. As soon as you see the numbers start to fall, people start saying, oh well, this is not a threat anymore. Well, it still very much is, and we've not even seen the start of it yet. So that's Tropical Storm Ian, and we've seen with Typhoon Noru, really impressive Category 5 peak yesterday, / this morning. Just really incredible to watch it, and then it started to get, almost miraculously, certainly mercifully, started to get taken apart a little bit by wind shear, which allowed this weakening to occur. Do you guys reckon that you went with 175 miles per hour overnight / this morning? Do you think in different circumstances that wind speed could have been maintained all the way until landfall?
I don't think you have maintained all the way till landfall, because there was anyway an eye wall replacement cycle starting at the time. Even before the easterly shear started increasing over the storm.
That's interesting. I'm not sure I noticed that.
Oh, it was there on radar and on a low-level microwave as well.
I know that the western eye wall was faltering just a little bit before the shear got to it. Look at that latest imagery once again, and you'll see another little burst of convection that could end up being a big burst of convection shortly over Polillo Island, which the storm didn't make landfall there.
It just grazed the top of it.
So a near miss. And then a landfall just where the coastline dips in the most, really. and now the storm making its passage over central Luzon. Still waiting for this elusive National Hurricane Center forecast on Ian. We've still not got the up-to-date information yet, and their update is due at any moment. It might tell us a lot of information about the future of the storm. This was the last cone. We're about to see whether the new cone will have any difference to it, whether there's anything we can take from it, whether there's any inferences that we can make our forecast and advice a little bit better. But remember that the center of the storm can still track anywhere within this cone. So anywhere from Fort Myers to the border with Alabama could receive a landfall, and the update is out. The government of Cuba has upgraded the hurricane watch to a hurricane warning for the Cuban provinces of Isla de Juventud, Pinar del Rio, and Artemisa, and upgraded the tropical storm watch to a tropical storm warning for the Cuban provinces of La Habana, Mayabec, and Matanzas. So basically, all the pink and yellow there in Cuba is now red and blue for the warnings. Government of the Cayman Islands has discontinued the tropical storm watch for Little Cayman and Cayman Brac, so that yellow shading there in the Eastern Caymans is gone. 50 mile per hour winds at this time, and they are still expecting a Category 4 peak at 130 miles per hour, and they are expecting landfall. I'm not sure what intensity they're expecting landfall at, but it will definitely be a hurricane landfall still, of course. I'm just trying to plot the points and figure out exactly where it is. I think we might have seen a slight shift east in this latest update.
I mean, if we try to overlay, if we can, we can try to overlay the center.
Wait, I was looking at the wrong one, pardon me. I don't think it's moved east, actually. I think it's going to be very, very similar, though. I think it's going to have barely moved at all. No sign of that new cone yet, but as soon as it does arrive, we'll let you know. We're going to take a short break in just a minute as we gather our thoughts once again and return with more coverage on Typhoon Noru. So many things to talk about. The worst of the storm is well over land now in central Luzon, with those Signal 5 warnings still in place. We'll see whether that's changed at 11 PM if they do an extra advisory. I assume they will be. That's still 8 PM there. We'll take a look at that as well. But still, as it stands, Signal 5 warnings still in effect for a significant chunk of central Luzon. Signal 4 warnings for an even larger area there, right to the west coast, the coast of Zambales, where the storm will exit in around 4 hours or 5 hours. Short questions here. Camilla says, will Ian become another Charlie or possible Michael? And will Ian become a high-end Category 4? Any thoughts?
Well, it's unlikely. I would say that much. Like, shear is going to be high when it starts making landfall in Florida. We know.
And another comment,
just that much reduces the chances of a Charlie type explosion.
Another comment, which model for Ian do you have most confidence in? Well, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure if you want to say, but
I think I'll give the most diplomatic answer and say it's not good to depend on any one particular model for any storm. Always take the model consensus.
Good answer. Could there be possible tornado warnings for Typhoon Noru?
I don't know if the terrain of the Philippines favors tornado-like signatures. But I'm not an expert on this subject, so I'll refer it to Kenneth.
Yes?
Probably not, but we'll talk about it in a moment. We're just out of time for this hour. Kenneth will go back to you after this. We're taking a short break. Noru is moving through the Philippines, and Ian has sparked hurricane warnings now for the western coast the western parts of Cuba. We'll be back again with another hour of coverage in just a moment. Our live coverage will continue in a moment. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Welcome back to our coverage on Typhoon Noru, which made landfall just over 2 hours ago at around 8:30 Philippine time this evening. It's now just gone 11, and it still has winds estimated of 130 miles per hour, pressure around 940 millibars, although I would imagine that our analyst team might suggest that it's a little bit weaker now. We'll hear from them in a moment. The storm is continuing sort of west-northwestwards and will eventually, fairly soon, enter the South China Sea within around 4 or 5 hours. And then it will once again have the chance to intensify. Also, we heard news just a moment ago from the National Hurricane Center. They've kept the wind speed the same for Ian, 50 miles per hour, but hurricane warnings are now in effect for Cuba. They've upgraded the warnings in Cuba from watches to warnings in all of those areas. Let's look at that first of all, because we have the new cone from National Hurricane Center, and this is interesting now. They are forecasting that the storm will start weakening before reaching the coast of Florida, so a bit of good news starting to come out there, although the intensity forecast is still not clear-cut at all. But major hurricane on Wednesday, weakens slightly, still a high-end category 2 there on that Thursday morning point, and then by the time it makes landfall on the Big Bend on Friday, it's a category 1. So that's potentially some more promising news coming out of that, but still, if it follows the eastern side of that cone, then you could be looking at a major hurricane landfall in Tampa or Fort Myers at a big impact storm. And of course the wind field will grow as the storm proceeds further north. I don't suppose our team have any comments on that right now. We've got Kenneth and Soham with us once again for this hour. Just a quick comment on that forecast cone.
So still, I'm not seeing too much of the change to the code yet. But with the approach, yeah, you need to upgrade to hurricane warning because of a very major threat that it's expected to become a major hurricane landfall or very close approach to Cuba, which that is devastating. That can do devastating damage. Like on Tuesday, the forecast. Not much change to the forecast, to be honest. Yeah.
And they're still calling there for a Category 4 peak after Cuba.
Yeah. Still in line with the previous model runs and the intensity forecast. Not much change, actually.
Back in the Western Pacific, this is Noru right now. There's a wide shot, and you just had a quick look at a close shot one moment ago there. There it is again. So this storm moving through Luzon now, and another convective burst, really big one blowing up on the southwestern side, and it's just ended there, and a new one might just be starting up. But the highest convection top starting to just simmer down a little bit over the center of the storm as it continues on its journey westwards. My name's Nathan Foy, here in the studio for another hour of coverage, and as you heard just a moment ago, the voice of Kenneth, and we're also joined by Soham and AWX for this hour. After this hour, we will be finishing our coverage for the time being, but that doesn't mean we're going away. We have this nice feature on YouTube now where it plugs into our automated feed, so as soon as this video ends, it will direct you over to our automated satellite imagery, which continues 24/7 to monitor Typhoon Noru from above. Now, just also waiting to see if there's any new information from PAGASA and a new warning information and a new warning map. I imagine that will update later than the actual warning information. But let me just check once again. I've still only got 8 PM here. The next advisory is due now, so that should be out at any time. I will keep looking out for it very, very closely indeed. But as far as I can see just yet, there's no sign of it. If you've got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air tonight in the Philippines and today in the American region, start your message with Force 13 all in text. Interesting question there. Can we have a proper tropical weather bulletin tonight instead of a live stream? I'm not sure. I know people appreciate the tropical weather bulletin format, but I think it's going to be more live coverage tonight. Let's see what else we have. How many days until Tropical Storm Ian becomes a hurricane? fairly soon, the way it's going. No real sign of intensification yet, but that button could be pushed at any time and it will start going and start strengthening. And as soon as the intensification really starts going for Ian, we'll probably see hurricane status get achieved within 24 hours. Let's see if I can... Well, let's go back to the rain graphics. And this is a up-to-date view of the possible rainfall conditions that you're seeing on the ground right now. And you'll notice that Tarlac City has entered some really high purple areas. That's around 50 millimeters per hour of rain rate. And that is definitely enough to trigger flooding. Bongabon, though, for a short time there was under 75 millimeters per hour. And just south of Cabanatuan City, also some high amounts of rain there of excess of 50 millimeters per hour. Gapan City too, just about getting the edge of that. Angeles currently at around 15 to 20 millimeters of rain, and San Fernando per hour, those rain rates. And those higher rain rates starting to enter Zambales now as well. Where do you reckon the center of the storm is?
Based on the interpolation, I estimated at 15.3 north, 120.7 east.
15.3 north, 120.7 east. And that puts it here. And that's as of what time? Right now?
Yes.
11 p.m. position, according to Kenneth there, on good authority, puts the location of the center of the storm here, very close to Tarlac City, just to the southeast, and just northeast of Mabalacat. So, not far then from Zambales, where it will eventually depart the Philippines and then move out over the South China Sea. And interesting to note that the worst of the rainfall, according to satellite at least, appears to be on the northern and eastern side of the centre. Looks like Manila is looking a lot better now. Still some significant rainfall possibly, but it looks like the worst conditions are very much retreating from Metro Manila. And people might suggest after this storm that it wasn't so bad in their area, but I guess it was just the shock of the whole thing really rapidly intensifying. Everywhere was under threat for a time, wasn't it?
Well, considering it was supposed to be like barely, even the first forecast cone for by Gtwc for this storm, it was not supposed to be only 45 miles per hour land. So think about that.
Comment there, will the rain in Laguna get worse? I was just looking, I wasn't particularly looking at that area, but I would say right now, no, it probably won't. The rain will probably start retreating very soon now. Rain rates there are only showing fairly low amounts right now anyway, of about 5 to 10 millimeters per hour, and that will hopefully continue to decrease. What was the peak intensity of Super Typhoon Noru? So we've got our two analysts here. Who'd like to tell us about how you came about your maximum wind speed estimate and what you were looking at to make that determination? Who should we give it to? Kenneth.
Alright. So, while I was sleeping, it still continues to intensify, and the analyst teams gave it 150 knots because, well, it just shined a T7.5 appearance based on nearly 21 degree eye temperature, very warm, and then I reckon it's water vapor is also extremely dry with only negative 20 for water vapor, which is super low. The cold medium gray rain also although pretty thin but still closed. Such an impressive appearance makes it we give at the higher end of the intensity estimate of 150 knots. Yeah, that's a pretty upper range of the estimates, given that the others estimate failed to pick up the forex. So later on, it's just quickly being backed by the easterly shear, and it weakened back, to category 4 just 6 hours after.
But do you think, looking back, that it sustained its appearance for long enough to warrant the 175 miles per hour?
Yes.
All right, fair enough. A few comments there talking about Angeles currently getting the brunt of the storm now, apparently. McGrath Joel says, when is the next update of Ian? So National Hurricane Center will do another intermediate advisory at 2 p.m. I don't know what the schedule is for our team, but we probably should get an update up on that soon. We will also be producing an automated stream on Ian as well a little bit later. Lots of people talking about the conditions at their location. So keep your observations coming in. They could be helpful to other people on the ground. Could be helpful for our information. So if it is safe to do so, please send in your observations. I'm just looking out for something that's different. A moment of lovely earlier on, our chat mod says the southern side of the storm just reached their area. Heavy rainfall happening right now and strong winds again. Let's see if we've got some news from PAGASA at this point. We've been waiting for a little bit now. Let's see. Have a little look on their website again. So they have still not updated it. So we're waiting for that. They're a little bit behind schedule, clearly. I think they might get rid of the Signal 5 warnings, or maybe if they're being cautious they might keep them in place. But certainly Signal 4 warnings will be staying whilst the storm moves through. Storm's position right now as of 11 p.m. according to our team, we have put it here, and that places it about 14 miles southeast of Tarlac City. It's about 225 kilometers. Angeles down there, 13 miles. San Fernando, 16. Gapan, 20. Cabanatuan, 21. Then eventually moving towards the west. So from Manila now, 53 miles, that's about 86 kilometers. It made its closest approach at about 75 kilometers. So it is now starting to move away a little bit at 11 p.m. You're watching Force 13 live coverage on two storms right now. Noru, Philippine named Karding, which is moving over central Luzon as a very powerful typhoon after making a Category 4 landfall. And the Category 4 candidate Tropical Storm Ian, which is forecasted to reach a very similar intensity as to what Noru is right now at 130 miles per hour on Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll talk about both of these storms in this hour of coverage, so send your messages in and we'll really follow the crowd. Modnar says, moderate rain here in northern Batangas, and that will continue for some time. Batangas will get probably some worse conditions shortly. Well, I'm not sure actually. Batangas, there's been some that big blow up just glanced the western coast there, so you might still get some heavy raindrops, but generally the conditions should start getting better for you down there. I always get confused between Batangas and Pangasinan for some reason. It's just the thing I have. Pangasinan is the area that's going to get much worse in the next few hours, as well, of course, as Zambales and Tarlac. That convection blow-up that was over the storm center earlier is really starting to wane now. Most of those minus 80 cloud tops disappearing. And wow, we're still waiting for PAGASA's update. Still no news from them yet. Let's see if we have some more comments. Well, a few people saying the update is out. Sometimes national agencies give Philippine nationals privilege. I see that sometimes with America as well. So you might get the update before us. Let's have a look here. More comments. Maricel says, will my place 1500 Metro Manila get heavy rainfall in the next 96 hours? That's a very specific time slot. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take a look at the GFS run and for total precipitation in the next 96 hours then, as you request, and see how much more rain we expect during that time period. This is from 6 UTC, which is which would have been about 1 PM. So it's a little bit old, but from 1 PM onwards, 96 hours, this is what it's showing up in terms of rain estimates. And you can see some areas getting pretty high amounts. We'll convert it in a minute. I know that the Philippines use millimeters. These are in inches. So you'll note some high values along those areas. In excess of 10 inches there in a few locations. And now that we've got all of them up, we can zoom in a bit and show those locations. So 9.4 there, not far north of Manila. That is getting on for 250 millimeters. The areas that are above 10 inches, 10 inches is 250 millimeters. So you're seeing high values there along that whole region in central southern Luzon. 9.3 in near Zambales. I think that's still in Tarlac possibly. That's over 200 millimeters in general, 200 millimeters for a wide swathe there. Well, not quite that far north, up there, 200 millimeters plus there. In that little bit further north, 150 plus, but down here definitely 200 millimeters for all of that area. Can't turn my pen off now. And once again, if we were to look back at the GFS model run for what happens to the storm next, well, there it is, grows in size, gets enormous compared to what it currently is before its Vietnamese landfall in around 3 days. And then another storm comes in behind it and possibly develops into a typhoon. Any comments from our analyst team about that second system?
I must say it's very that second system's been very consistent on the GFS, so it's definitely something worth watching. Like I believe it's been there for like I have no idea, but
days.
It's been there for so long I've lost count of it. So yeah.
Animusion says, is it safe to say that Noru is now down to a category 3?
Considering our latest update by the analyst team is at 115 miles per hour, yeah.
So the analyst team now going 115 miles per hour and a pressure of 956. I can't update my bar right now, so I'll just have to vocalize that every so often that the bottom bar now is a little bit out of date. That was the landfall intensity when it first hit the coast of eastern Luzon. But now our analyst team just heard there live that it is down to 115 miles per hour and a pressure of 956, which makes it a category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Still lacking information from the Philippines right now. I know that some people say that they have it, but we don't see anything here. But certainly from our team, they suggest that the storm has weakened to a Category 3. Just looking for some more comments here and any more information that we can bring. Oh my goodness, that was incredibly loud. Kenneth, are you still there with us right now?
Yep.
Your thoughts, well, not your thoughts, but any news from Recon right now? They're still around the storm Ian. Were they still halfway through a mission? There was more information coming in?
There's more information coming in. Yeah, they just made a center path minimum extrapolate pressure 1002.9 millibars. And we're waiting for drop zone data still. No, they're at 925, so no zone. They're not 1002 millibar, yeah. But this extrapolate pressure, we still use the previous drop zone data to support 1001 millibars minimum central pressure.
1001.
But the circulation still remains the circulation remains good, and there's a very resounding temperature spike at the center, which would suggest its warm core is very well defined.
Let's try and get both of them on a split screen now that we're looking at both of them really at the same time here. So try and make it a little bit easier for all of you viewing. So on the right hand side is the latest on Tropical Storm Ian. On our left is still the serious impacts of Noru. Got loads of images to play with here. There we go. So Noru on the left and Ian on the right hand side, and I think we'll stick mainly with this kind of imagery for the rest of today's stream. Noru down to a Category 3 according to our analyst team, and Tropical Storm Ian holding at 50 miles per hour according to the National Hurricane Center. Are you in agreement with that team? I'm guessing we are.
Yeah.
Let's read the latest information from the National Hurricane Center's discussion regarding Ian then. The satellite presentation is gradually improving this morning. The overall circulation appears better defined in visible satellite imagery, and fragmented bands of convection around the center are showing increased signs of curvature. Notice that. The low-level center of Ian also appears better defined in the latest data collected by the NOAA and Air Force hurricane hunters. Although the vortex is still vertically tilted, tail Doppler radar data suggests the low and mid-level centers are beginning to converge. An earlier center drop sonde indicated the minimum pressure dropped slightly to 1001, but the aircraft winds thus far have not reflected any strengthening, so 50 miles per hour. The latest fixes suggest Ian is beginning to make its turn around to the western side of the subtropical ridge, and the initial motion is west-northwestward at 290 degrees, 12 knots. A gradual turn to the northwest is expected later today as the cyclone passes well southwest of Jamaica, followed by a north-northwestward motion that brings the center of Ian west of the Cayman Islands on Monday and near or over western Cuba by early Tuesday. There is a relatively high confidence in this portion of the track forecast. However, once the cyclone emerges over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, the spread in the track guidance increases at days 3 to 5. The HWRF and GFS still lie on the western side of the guidance envelope and show Ian moving over the central or western Florida panhandle, whilst the ECMWF and UK Met models show a track further east into west central Florida.
We have the update. We have the update from PAGASA. It's on Facebook now.
Oh.
The official account. I'll just post it in the live output channel.
I still won't be able to access that unless that's a direct embed.
You'll have to access it from using the website, but it's visible, it's viewable.
We do have the 11 PM bulletin actually, and here it is. So here is the latest map, and they've already dropped to signal 3 for the landfall area and signal 4 for Bulacan, Nueva Ecija, Tarlac, southern Pangasinan, and northern most of Zambales still. Signal 3 for Rizal, Metro Manila, Bataan, the rest of Pangasinan, Nueva Ecija, part of Aurora. Signal 2 extending further west, or retreating further west now. Camarines Norte, most of Quezon still, Batangas, Cavite, La Union, Benguet, Nueva Vizcaya, Quirino, and the rest of Aurora. Catanduan is out of the warnings, as is Sorsogon and Albay. Signal 1 for Camarines Sur, Isabela, Mountain Province, Ifugao, Kalinga, Abra, and Ilocos Sur. Cagayan, Apayao, and Ilocos Norte are out of the warnings. Northern Mindoro still in the Signal 1 as well. We'll catch up on Noru in a moment, but let's continue reading the latest route Ian. Where were we? Overall, the National Hurricane Center track forecast remains near the center of the guidance envelope and still lies very near the TVCA multi-model consensus. However, there is still significant uncertainty in the long-range track forecast for Ian, and future adjustments to this portion of the forecast will likely be required. The atmospheric and oceanic conditions over the northwestern Caribbean Sea appear very conducive for significant strengthening, so once Ian becomes more organized, the high oceanic heat content and low vertical wind shear conditions appear likely to support rapid intensification. The DTOPS still shows a greater than 90% chance of rapid strengthening during the next 2 to 3 days. The intensity guidance remains very aggressive with strengthening Ian, and the National Hurricane Center forecast reflects this potential. Ian is expected to become a hurricane by tonight or early Monday, and is forecast to reach major hurricane strength before it reaches western Cuba. This forecast lies very near the latest ship's guidance model and the IVCN aid. By day 4, a significant increase in southwesterly shear is forecasted by the global models, and this is forecast to induce some weakening as the vertical structure of the hurricane is disrupted. Despite this, Ian is likely to have an expanding wind field and will be slowing down by that time, which will have the potential to produce significant wind and storm surge impacts across portions of the Florida West Coast and the Florida Panhandle. Some key messages: Ian is expected to produce heavy rainfall, flash flooding and possible mudslides in areas of higher terrain, particularly over Jamaica and Cuba. Flash and urban flooding possible across the Florida Keys and Florida Peninsula through midweek. Additional flooding on rivers across northern Florida and parts of the southeast US could not be ruled out later this week. Life-threatening storm surge and hurricane-force winds expected in portions of western Cuba beginning late Monday, where a hurricane warning is now in effect. Efforts to protect life and property should be rushed to completion. Ian is expected to be a major hurricane in the eastern Gulf of Mexico during the middle of the week, but uncertainty in the long-term track and intensity forecast is higher than usual. Regardless of the exact track and intensity, there is a risk of dangerous storm surge, hurricane-force winds and heavy rainfall along the west coast of Florida and the Florida Panhandle by the middle of the week, and residents in Florida should ensure they have their hurricane plan in place, follow any advice given by local officials, and closely monitor updates to the forecast. Back to our split screen, showing Typhoon Noru and Tropical Storm Ian live here on Force 13 as we continue to watch these two storms. Noru still remaining quite impressive as it moves over Luzon, now down to a Category 3 according to our latest analysis, 115 miles per hour, 956 millibars. Let's get some questions. Would they do a recon update when Ian becomes a major hurricane? They're going to be doing recon all the way through.
They definitely will.
Yep, all the way through. What's the percentage chance that Ian will do a track of Wilma?
Considering it's already moving towards the north, it's it's already not gonna do it, because Wilma continued tracking more towards the northwest until it hit the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula.
Will Ian be forming an eye soon?
Well, it still needs to concentrate its energy over the low-level center and initiate deep convective bursts before we can think about an eye in the storm. So,
Gee. Once again, there's the latest PAGASA map from 11 PM if you've not seen it yet. Those red zones signal 4 warnings for a large chunk of central Luzon. They've already removed the highest warnings for the Polillo Islands, Quezon and Aurora, which are down to signal 2 warnings, signal 3, sorry, Polillo down to signal 2. And Manila, signal 3 there, still in place, but the signal 4 in the northern part has disappeared. This storm is on its way out and will be leaving the Philippines in around 4 or 5 hours. Hopefully a little bit less, maybe. Do we think that Typhoon Noru... We've had this question already, but you mustn't have heard it, but whether it could stall in the South China Sea and intensify into a Category 3 or higher, but it won't stall, and it will become a Category 3 or higher possibly again, without stalling. If we shoot back to the latest...
I will say this influx in Western Pacific activity since late August is pretty unprecedented.
I mean, late season can throw up loads of storms in the Western Pacific.
Yeah, late season in the Western Pacific, it's always, especially in La Nina.
There once again is the Gtwc cone, which is forecasting a near due west movement all the way into Vietnam at a fair pace, with the maximum wind just before landfall of at least 100 knots, although there is that little window of possibly further intensification before landfall there, because that 100 knot point is still quite far from land. Just after it moves inland, it's down to 65 knots as it reaches the border with Laos.
When was the last time we had a major landfall in Vietnam?
It can't have been long ago. We've had several in the last few years.
Yeah, but all the storms peaked at as a major strength, but never made a major strength landfall in Vietnam.
Who?
Vamco and Vamco and all the other storms and Rai all either veered away from Vietnam at the last moment or had weakened below major intensity when it made landfall. So I'm wondering what was the last actual major landfall strength in Vietnam.
Let me find out then. There's been quite a few. I know that, I think. Let's find out.
One I can think of is Nancy 1982, but that's the only one I can think of at the moment.
I don't even know that one. Okay, just looking through them now. Major typhoon landfalls in Vietnam. There haven't been many. And I don't know which one the most recent is because I've got loads of storms appearing in front of me, but I'll just go from south to north. So in the south, Lola in 1993 made a brief Category 3 landfall near Nha Trang.
Yeah, I remember reanalyzing that.
Yep.
I remember reanalyzing that. Yeah.
Therese in 1972 made a Category 3 landfall just north of Quy Nhon, and right next to it, Agnes of 1984 also did. Zach in 1995 made a Category 3 landfall south of Cang Nagai. And then further north, you have Cecil in 1985, which made a Category 3 landfall near Dong Ha. Harriet, no, actually that didn't do it. Charlotte in 1956 made landfall near New Nhat. And that's all of them on here. That's according to the JTWC database.
I'm actually looking to see if Molavi of 2020 made landfall as a major. I don't think it did, but I'll just check. That's what the chat is saying.
I don't think it did. But yeah, Vietnam has quite a few Category 3s in its history books.
It made landfall as a minimal Cat 1.
Wow. So that changed quite a lot. Another comment there from Eva. Did I hear it right? A while ago you mentioned that there's another weather disturbance after Noru. Will it develop into a typhoon? And here it is. You can see what happens. Here is Noru moving westwards into Vietnam, and after that, it's within 4 or 5 days from now, another storm develops according to GFS model and becomes a substantial typhoon headed towards Hainan. So that is something that might happen. This forecast period shows 7 days, so that landfall in Hainan as a category 3 is within that 7-day forecast.
Definitely something to keep watching.
And this imagery we're looking at right now is WSV3. And that shows very nicely the world weather models. Only the GFS though, unfortunately, for the world. But it shows all of the US-based model runs as well. The mesoscale and whatnot. Let's go back and check the latest rainfall charts and images right now and see what we can see. Let's just bring that up on the screen here. So once again, there's the 11 PM position that we've put there on the map, and you can see all of those purple areas and dark areas. That's 50 millimeters per hour occurring over Tarlac City right now. For a few frames as well, they're really getting hit by very heavy rainfall. Look, there's some black areas underneath that as well. That's 60 millimeters of rain per hour. So this is satellite indicated. It might not be completely accurate, but it gives you a guide as to where the worst rainfall is currently falling. And absolutely around Tarlac City right now, really getting it. Areas further south look like they might be getting away with little less. Angeles there is at least 10 millimeters per hour, probably 20 actually. San Fernando, roughly 20 as well. Manila looks like it's not getting any more severe rainfall bouts, but also we've always got to watch out for any more convective bursts that might happen. And you can see that big convective burst that happened earlier on, 2 of them. The main one lasted much longer than the subsidiary one. And we continue to watch the progress of this typhoon moving generally in a west-northwesterly direction. Let's see if we have any other comments now. None just yet, but start your message with Force 13 all in text and we can take your comments live on the air. We hope things are still reasonably safe over there in the Philippines. Of course, this was a Category 4 landfall, 130 mile an hour winds, and it is now down to 115 miles per hour, Category 3. That is the current intensity of the storm, and we expect it will weaken some more, probably down to Category 1 when it enters the South China Sea, before we start to find some more strengthening again. Sarkar Pianist says, is an eye forming? I don't know which storm you're referring to, whether that's in Noru or in Ian now, but there's no chance that we're going to see...
No.
Both answers is no, okay. So there's no chance that we're seeing anything new with Noru until it enters over the South China Sea again. Patrick, one of our members, is touching base with us in the chat, live from a car. And what is the current progress on Noru and hurricane warnings in effect for Cuba? Yes. So, Kenneth, as you look back at Noru right now, what's the latest that we can say to people?
The latest, the convections are now further weakened and further eroded the CDO as the land interaction continues to progress. So I would say it weakens a bit further. Yeah. Yeah, it is expected as you're inside the high terrain in the Philippines.
Oh, that was interesting. Which category do we think Ian would make during Florida landfall? It's a big question that's up in the air right now, but I can tell you the National Hurricane Center's
If
forecast have a Category 1 landfall.
anywhere, it could be anywhere, honestly, in terms of strength.
But we always got to point out, if it follows the eastern periphery of that cone and makes landfall near Tampa or Fort Myers, it could still be a Category 3 by the time it hits there. And a growing one, and storm surge amounts could be quite serious in that whole entire area. We could see, still speculative at the moment, but possibly in excess of 10 feet of storm surge. But that from the National Hurricane Center suggesting that the storm will start a weakening trend as it approaches the coast of Florida. Basically, the longer it can remain out at sea before landfall, the more chance we have of this storm being weaker. Which is possibly not what you think might have been the case, because usually we say that the longer a storm has over water, the more stronger it could get. But as it moves further north, the more it's over water. Well, it doesn't matter whether it's over water or not, but just for the best outcome for people on land. If it stays over water longer in the northern Gulf of Mexico, then there will be more chance that the storm weakens due to heavy wind shear. But still, the National Hurricane Center are expecting a Category 4 peak intensity from Ian, which is there on the right hand side of your screen. Still not got a huge amount of convection, but the rotation is looking a lot better. On the left hand panel, once again, the big burst of convection from Noru looks to have just about finished, and in those later images, Kenneth, looks like we're seeing the return of that mid-level or upper-level cloud structure where it would have been stacked with the eye, now appears to be quite a bit further west of where the eye itself will be, probably due to that wind shear, yeah?
But yeah, it is stacking. It's still a little bit, maybe a little bit tilt, but it's still, we can still say it is more or less stacked. It will become a very vertical in the next few hours, as it is expected to develop more rapidly from here now on, as the forecast now stacked again, pretty much so. Just it needs more convection sprawling near the center for it to level off, for or healthier structure to just level and rapidly intensify later, as expected in recent forecasts persistently.
And still in some areas, you think we'll be seeing at least 160 kilometer sustained winds right now?
Yeah, pretty much so.
Should point out that it's worth pointing out that GFS for Ian has continuously shifted east. Even the new 12C model run, it's east again.
With which storm, sorry? On
I'm
Ian?
talking Ian here. Ian.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Let me see if I can find that latest model run.
I have a trend GIF. I have a trend GIF.
Oh, you do?
Let me see if I can post it. Yeah.
All right, we'll wait for that. Ian on our right hand panel, 50 miles per hour, latest from the National Hurricane Center. Warnings have been upgraded in Cuba. There are now hurricane warnings for those western provinces and tropical storm warnings more centrally, including over La Habana.
Yeah, I've posted it in the live output chat.
Okay, so what we're about to see here is what we call a trend GIF. And this is not a progression of the storm's movement in the forecast, but a trend of the same point in time over 4 different model runs. And you can see that over time it has trended north and slightly east. That's fascinating. Interestingly though, it's actually trended a little bit weaker as well.
Generally, that's because of land interaction with
Because of
Cuba.
land interaction. Just to reiterate, because our bottom bar is a little bit out of date now, we'll be finishing our coverage soon, and if you're still on our YouTube page on this video, it will redirect you to our automated feed, where you'll be able to see more on Typhoon Noru all night and into tomorrow and beyond. But just a reminder of the latest warnings from the 11 PM update from PAGASA. They have downgraded a lot of them, especially in Aurora and Quezon, down to Signal 3, which must be a bit of a relief there. Signal 4 still in effect for Nueva Ecija, Bulacan, Pampanga, Tarlac, Zambales and southern Pangasinan. Signal 3 warnings for the rest of Pangasinan, the rest of Nueva Ecija, southern part of Aurora, northern part of Quezon, northern Rizal, northern Metro Manila, in fact I think all of it, and Bataan and the southern tip of Zambales. Signal 2 for La Union, Benguet, Nueva Vizcaya, Quirino, northern Aurora, the Polillo Islands down from Signal 5, most of the rest of Quezon, Camarines Norte, Laguna, Cavite and Batangas. Signal 1 for Lubang Island, the northern part of Mindoro, Marinduque, the rest, what's ever left of Quezon. I think Masbate are still in there, are they? Oh, is that further down? Sorry. Let's just check that. Oh, no, they are. Yeah, Masbate, Camarines Sur, Isabela, Kalinga, Abra, Ilocos Sur, Mountain Province, and Ifugao. Signal 1 warnings. Still a major situation currently ongoing, a storm that we thought we wouldn't be seeing. Certainly out of the forecast that we saw for Typhoon Noru, still struggling to get over the fact that at one point just a few days ago it was only forecasted to be a tropical storm landfall, and then 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago that was only going to be a category 1 landfall, turned out to be a category 5 peak with winds of 175 miles per hour, which we covered extensively this morning, and ended up making a category 4 landfall with winds of 130 miles per hour just as we came to air 3 hours ago. Landfall time was around 8:30 Philippine time, and now here we are coming up to the midnight hour, and the storm is moving well inland and almost probably closer to the other side now, towards the western side, the Zambales coast, and will enter the South China Sea again. Also, the Gtwc forecasted it well, I think. It's moved a little bit north of west in that time as well, and we expect that it will turn pretty much arrow straight westerly by the time it enters the South China Sea. We'll take a few more questions. I don't think there's any other real information to dispense at this point, apart from what we've already seen. How likely is it that Ian will hit the Florida Panhandle? Well, I would say that's the most likely scenario now. As a matter of fact, we can bring up the wind speed probabilities for Ian. I'm just going to have to fetch them though. And I'm pressing all the wrong buttons to try and find the wind probs. So this next graphic will show you the chances of tropical storm force winds in all of these locations. And you'll note the percentage chances down there. Very high chance for most of the west coast of Florida when you look at that. Tampa is at about 55% to 60%. Fort Myers is about 45 to 50%. Naples hovering around 35%, but it's the Big Bend area of Florida that is getting up to 80%, 70% nearly now. So those chances definitely increasing, and you look at the western coast of Cuba, they're definitely going to get the brunt of this storm, possibly as an intensifying Category 3 hurricane by the time it gets there. That's certainly what the National Hurricane Center are forecasting now. They're expecting a peak of 130 miles per hour at least on their latest forecast cone. And it's probably about the most probably about the most aggressive they can go with the storm's current intensity. It is only 50 miles per hour right now, but still it's got a long way to go to intensify, and it probably will. Lots of nice comments saying how good the stream was today. I mean, we do our best in testing circumstances, as always. The viewers make it most of the time as well. All of your questions we have answers for, and your observations on the ground as well, I'm sure will have been useful to at least someone out there who's watching. And we just have a few more minutes to run here if you have any further questions for us that we can possibly take out, and any other things that we could show on our imagery. I don't have much resources just here right now, but let's just take a look at all the different imagery I've got of all the other various different things. So there is Ian on the infrared imagery. Still not looking the best when you look at the infrared. And then a wide shot of Noru there in the Western Pacific. And look out east there as well. There's another tropical disturbance that might develop into our next storm, even before that South China Sea one after Noru. That one's going to go towards the Mariana Islands and eventually towards the Ogasawara Islands of Japan. That's going north. So don't worry about that one in the Philippines. And then we have this visible imagery of Ian as well. Just to look at the Eastern Pacific Basin, Tropical Storm Newton has weakened, I think. I think it's down to a depression now. And you can see, obviously, Ian entering the picture. It is quite a large system, passing well clear of Jamaica and eventually towards the Cayman Islands, which are under a hurricane warning. And a wide shot, a full shot of the Western Pacific. That disturbance is actually further to the northeast, but that is a third disturbance there down towards the south that I was pointing out before. But the second disturbance, that big one that's moving off towards the northwest, that's the one that's probably going to become our next tropical storm in the Western Pacific. Once again, there's our close-up imagery of Noru right now, and that pretty much finishes off everything right now. Does Tropical Storm Ian have any lightning? I know it did last night in some of its convective bursts. I would imagine right now it's probably only got small amounts, probably not very much. But at this point, any final thoughts from our team? Kenneth, Soham?
Currently, Typhoon Noru is currently, despite weakening right now, it is still a pretty intense, severe typhoon that is inside the Luzon area, where the worst conditions still affecting the areas. The danger is clearly not out yet. And Ian, well, in the next few days, those in Cuba and Florida, the warning, evacuations start going. As the storm is going to rapidly intensify in the forecast, and it's mainly for Noru and Ian. And please stay safe and for those on the passage when the storm is approaching, stay away from the coast, stay indoors, stop all water activity, and evacuate to higher elevations and more concrete buildings if needed.
So, many final words here?
Yeah, so I'll end by saying that the GFS deepens the 96W invest 96W to, I think that's 963 millibars.
Wow.
In just 48 hours out.
Oh my goodness. So that's
Either
another
968
typhoon
or
out to sea.
983. Either 963 or 983. I can't tell. It's pretty small. I'll just double check and get back to you.
Well, I don't think we have time for that. We are finishing up here now. But you can stay tuned if you stay on this video right now that you're watching, if you're on YouTube, and it will redirect to our automated stream of Typhoon Noru with the very latest satellite imagery. Actually has even more satellite views than we have on here, so it's quite good to look at throughout the night if you're struggling to sleep in the Philippines tonight, and also for the rest of the duration of this storm as it reaches Vietnam in the next few days. We're signing off on our commentary though. We'll be back with more discussion and live coverage on both Noru and Ian later on this evening US time or / this morning in the Philippines. But until then, have a good evening and stay safe out in the storm. It's still a very dangerous one.